Welcome, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about mediation specifically as a conflict resolution tool. There are multiple different types and styles of conflict resolution, but as a mediator, I want to introduce you to what my offering is and to mediation in general. So let's see if we can make the tech work. All right, so in today's program, we're going to look at conflicts that can arise when important decisions need to be made, and specifically about care and planning for elders. Mediation is a confidential process, and that means that everything that is said in the room between the family members or interested parties and me is confidential, and it cannot be used anywhere outside of the room. So if the families wind up in litigation, there's no testimony where I'm not a witness. And it also means that if I step in as a mediator, I speak to everybody individually, and whatever they tell me is confidential, and I will not repeat it in the mediation room unless I'm given express permission to do that. So it's voluntary. The mediator is neutral. I have no skin in the game. I have no outside interest in a particular outcome when I mediate. What I want to do is create a safe space for everybody to have their concerns heard and to be able to brainstorm together about a solution that they can reach that everyone can live with. It's quick, so it's faster than litigation for sure. And it's cheaper than litigation because it's to the point. It's a very pointed process. So I like to say when change is in the air as we age, our physical, mental, and cognitive abilities are all on the table in terms of potential changes. And sometimes it can seem like everything's changing at the same time, and it's up to us to keep up with all of these changes, whether it's decisions about our housing, what's happening in our income and expenses, medical care, and just in general, our overall well-being. And when these changes in our situation affect our loved ones, there can be lots of disagreements about the best way to proceed. Simple differences of opinion can lead to arguments, and arguments can, blow up into full-blown conflicts. How we handle disagreements can depend on a lot of things. How confident are we in our choices? And I would add, what's our history, our family history of dealing with conflict? How much do we value our loved ones' opinions? And how easy is it to talk about all of this with the people who are going to be affected by our decisions? So before things get really heated, it may be time to try a different way of solving disagreements than the ways that we're accustomed to. Whether we're talking about caregiving, health care, how we spend our money, transportation, it's easy for things to get complicated, and they can be complicated by geographic challenges. Now our families are spread far and wide. There may be people who live close to us who have more input in our decision making, and those who are further away want to be more involved but can't be. There may be complications in all of our relationships, or differences of opinion, like perhaps about things like politics that are unrelated to the decision that we have to make about our own lives, but can impact the way we communicate with people important to us. So common barriers to resolution include issues around trust, what is the history of trust between family members, communication skills, communication techniques. How do we communicate? Maybe we don't communicate at all. Historical impasses, break points that people have reached in your life where they draw a line in the sand about decisions, have done that in the past, and now those impasses are carrying over to important decisions that affect you currently in your life at this point. And of course, any of these issues can be very triggering and very emotional for everyone involved, and those can create barriers to a common resolution. So we're going to look at a different way of addressing agreements with the people who matter most to you. Of course, we all know what conflict looks like. I can't agree to that. That will never work, of course. And you're often running on what's not going to happen and how things are not going to get resolved. But I like to say resolution can look like many different things. And this graphic suggests, agreement in principle, doing research, coming across and accepting people's different points of view until you can get to a resolution that maybe you could not have gotten to without looking at things from a different perspective. So impasse occurs in a disagreement when parties hold tight to their facts. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about impasse and how mediators try to break through impasse. And one of the ways is to recognize first that when people take hardened positions and are relying on conclusions they've reached, there's really it's difficult for the mediator to break through those hardened positions. The goal is to get everyone to start talking about what their interests and concerns are. And I'll give some examples of the difference between positions and interests as we continue. Again, so mediation is confidential, it's voluntary, the mediator is neutral, it can be quick, and it can be economical. But it is not therapy, it is not counseling, it is not social work, and it's not a substitute for any of these support services. And I can't tell you how many people have said when I talk about what I do as a mediator, oh, that sounds like therapy. No, I am not a therapist. And we are very practically focused on a particular problem, unlike the work you might be doing in therapy or some other form of counseling. And so I encourage people who do agree to mediate, if they have outside support or if they need outside support, to be sure to stay in touch with their outside support systems. All right, mediators' tools. What is it? What's the magic sauce? And again, I've named that we try to help people identify their underlying interests in a particular problem and start naming things that are common, that they have in common, their common interests, their common concerns. And then the mediator might delegate work to the different members involved in the conflict to go out and gather information and help develop a plan through collaboration that everyone can agree with. So it's an independent process. Mediation does not have to involve a court or litigation. It does not have to involve the exchange of documents, financial disclosure, which is usually a principal part of exchanging information in any litigation. And really, mediation may not, especially in a first session, may not result in an agreement at the conclusion, but what it may do is create new ways for people to communicate with each other so that they can continue to work at resolving the problem, either with the continued help of the mediator or on their own with some new skills they may learn. So how does mediation get started? There are court-mandated programs in every court in New York. All the courts now are required to have some access to what they call alternative dispute resolution, which generally involves mediation. A family member who's concerned can reach out, or there can be referrals by a professional. And I have conducted mediations through all three types of referrals, whether through a court program, a family member's inquiry, or a referral by a professional who is seeing a family that's struggling, it's holding up the professional's work, and they're smart enough to recommend that the family consider mediation to get to the ultimate work that that professional needs to do. Unlike a court dispute, an elder adult may participate in a mediation even if their cognitive abilities might otherwise interfere with their ability to participate in a court dispute. So mediation doesn't have the high bar that litigation involves in terms of capacity. I'll speak a little bit more about that as we go on. But the elder adult who's going to be impacted by any decision making always has a right to participate in the dispute resolution process to the extent that they're able. And that might mean actually just being present in the room with a support person or an aide, a care provider, just to make sure that they can participate at whatever level. So before I jump into the types of issues that get mediated, I want to pause just in case there are any questions coming into the chat about the process of mediation.
Sure. I think Karen asked a question about the difference between a mediator and an arbitrator. Sorry, I think you addressed this, but I think it's part of what you spoke about. So I wonder if you want to address
Great
that.
question. I did not specifically address it.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. So arbitrators are deciders. They're not officially judges, but people appear before the arbitrator and argue their case like they would in court. And then the arbitrator issues a decision. Mediators don't issue decisions unless really pressed by the family to make a recommendation. They might make a mediator's recommendation, but that's not their primary role. Their primary role is to create a safe space for the family to discuss and reach a resolution that they define. So I think that addresses that. Claire, anything else before I continue? Okay.
No, I think you can keep going. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So you can see this list. And pretty much anything that can be impacted by our changing situation as we age can be a topic for mediation. And again, you'll see that capacity to understand is much more loosely defined than it might be in a court proceeding. So then what does a successful mediation actually look like? And what doesn't get talked about often enough is that the parties who attend have to show up with a commitment to listening to each other and a desire to reach a resolution together. Everyone's going to have an opportunity to state their concerns without being judged or criticized. Different conflict resolution tools may be suggested by the mediator, and I've referred to them earlier, to help everyone move past their hardened positions to find common interests. A solution may begin to take shape at the conclusion of a mediation, but there may be the need for additional mediation sessions to iron out important details, or a commitment on the part of the family to continue the conversation until there is an agreed resolution. So then what actually happens at the mediation? There'll be an intake, especially for an elder adult or somebody whose decisions are on the table, to screen for abuse, neglect, and their capacity to participate. Then in the early in the first session, there'll be introductions of the mediator, and everybody at the table will introduce themselves and start naming the problem, setting agreed guidelines for how the discussion is going to be conducted, stating what everybody's goals and expectations are, and actually defining what a successful mediation session will look like. So, getting started, what are our priorities? We have to know what's important to us before we come to the table. And I have to say that my procedure when I mediate, I always talk to everyone individually before the actual mediation takes place, so that I know what's important to everyone who's going to show up at the mediation. And I may hear that they're miles apart and have very different goals and intentions, but it's really important for the participants to get clear on what's important to them, and for me to understand that before we get started in an actual session with everyone at the table. So, for example, what are different types of priorities that people might have when it comes to finances? Somebody's priority might be to make sure that all the money is well managed. Then it might be more important even to preserve financial independence and or finally to preserve privacy and security when it comes to managing finances. Or priorities around transportation issues. For those of us who drive, there's always the decision, is it time to give up driving? How will I get to my appointments? How will I stay social and meet my friends? Am I actually a danger to others on the road, or do I just need to take AAA or AARP's driving class, And how will I get around if I do give up my car? And then you can translate this to those of us who live by public transportation and what our choices might be. And when it comes to housing, is it time to downsize? Now, some of us already are pretty downsized, but for people who have means or homes, and they have to consider whether they need to stay or it's time to move out. And then all the decisions that come with moving. Where would I live? I don't want to have to start all over again. So what's important to me in considering downsizing? So next steps then are identifying common interests within the family and starting to work on a plan. And tools for working on a plan might first be to delegate responsibility for gathering information and then coming back together to share that information and collaborate on a plan of action. And the example I like to give is whether an elder adult needs to give up their car keys. Information gathering might include things like maybe the elder's meds need to be adjusted. Maybe they need to have their vision checked. Maybe the car hasn't been inspected, needs new brakes, needs to be taken off the road, needs new tires. So that can be delegated to different people in the family to go gather information about that and then come back and share what they have learned. Yeah, mom needed new glasses. Yeah, the car needed new brakes. Yeah, that fender bender was because the bump in the vehicle was because somebody bumped into the vehicle when it was parked. It was not while the elder was driving. So those are the steps that might be involved in developing a plan of action. So again, information gathering can be a step on the path to collaboration. And collaboration can be a building block for resolving disagreements. Again, the parties may still be quite far apart on what they think an appropriate resolution would be, but we're not there yet. We're just using collaboration as a way of beginning to work together towards an agreement. So, for example, how are positions different from interests? When it comes back to finances, 3 adult siblings might have very different positions on what should be happening with managing mom's money. The elder might say, I should be the one to manage everything. And another sibling might say, Mom always wanted me to be in charge. And maybe one sibling says, I don't want to have anything to do with any of this. So those are their hardened positions. Let me just see if I can back up a bit here. But their concerns their common interests and concern might start with, can we agree we all love mom and we're concerned about her financial security, her finances, and her independence. And that just might be the first building block for moving off of hardened positions into beginning to express our underlying concerns for mom's financial welfare. A caregiver might have concerns as well, being concerned about a loved one's autonomy, independence, maintaining their social connection, and of course their safety within the home and out in public. I'm just want to get I'm just checking our time here. So then where is the common ground? All right, we don't want our loved one to be taken advantage of financially. We all want to be financially independent for mom as well, and we all want to reach a decision that everyone can live with. So some health and medical challenges. The need to make decisions that affect our health and medical care can raise many opportunities for disagreement and the need to find a new way of resolving these types of decisions. Who gets to decide what to tell an elder adult about a diagnosis and care plan? And what should we tell the elder or adult? Do we name the disease? Do we talk about treatment options? Or is it going to be a huge secret till the end? And these are all culture impacts how we handle these kind of challenges, but also communication skills. When should we tell the elder? As soon as we find out, before treatment starts. Lots of change points in the decision making. How should we tell them? Should it be a family meeting? Maybe leave it to the medical staff, or one-on-one with a family member? I like to say, no matter what the challenge is, no matter what the conflict is, the elder is always in the room. And this is especially important when cognitive capacity is an issue, that it's always the elders' issues, interests, and concerns that are a priority, and their best interests that are a priority. So the elder is always in the room. There may not be one right answer for any of these decisions. How do we get to a decision how we get to a decision may be just as important for our overall well-being individually and as a family as the ultimate decision that we reach. Should the car keys be taken away? Should we use Accessoride? Should mom be calling Ubers? All of these are choices, and how we get to the decision is as important in maintaining communication and relationships within the family as is the actual decision that needs to be made. And this is where mediation can be helpful. So I mentioned briefly the issue of capacity and cognitive ability. Elders may have different tolerances to tolerate conflict, to participate in conflict resolution process. Let's just back this up a little. And mediation is a very democratic, forgiving process for allowing people of different capabilities and cognitive abilities to participate, regardless of where their ability to actually make the final decisions for themselves. So a little bit of review. We looked at conflicts that can arise in care and planning for an elder's well-being. We looked at mediation as an effective tool for addressing these conflicts. And we learned that when parties to a conflict take hardened positions, it doesn't leave much room for discussion. But when the parties can move off of their hardened positions to discuss their underlying interests and concerns, we can start developing building blocks for agreeing on more complex aspects of the conflict. So it's confidential, it can be facilitated by a trained neutral, it's voluntary, it's expeditious, and it's economical. The elder is always in the room, and I am available to support you should you need more information about mediation or would like to find out how mediation could support you.